The BCN Divine Triangle. Black Christian nationalism seeks to change society in order to accomplish the liberation of black people, and realizes that we, as a people, are engaged in a struggle for power and for our very survival. We utilize the BCN Divine Triangle as a godly symbol to access and connect with the mystical powers that was in our ancestors and the cosmic energy and creative intelligence of the universe. We believe in the raging desire for freedom, born of the Holy Spirit. We believe in the healing powers of the revolutionary BCN group process, which begins the liberation of black people by erasing 400 years of behavior modification. We believe in the transforming power of positive righteousness, where we as a people take a stand for righteousness over evil. We pledge to let the power of the Divine Triangle work its wonders in us. We pledge to take the power of the Divine Triangle to African people across the world. May God and the Black nation be our witness.
This morning, we're going to talk about the book of Daniel.
Right. Okay.
Apocalyptic nationalism was a response of the faithful to the black nation Israel's intense, prolonged oppression and religious persecution by white Gentile Greeks and Romans.
Well,
This religious perspective was the product of a distinct historical situation. I'll repeat that again. This perspective, the product of a distinct historical situation. An effort to make sense of God's covenant relationship with the chosen people in their extremity. During the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, apocalyptic literature appeared as the reawakened voice of the now silent age of the prophecy. The great apocalypses gave inspiration and hope to a suffering but courageous remnant of the chosen nation.
all right.
If I could get someone to read point 1 for me as we get started.
The fervor of apocalyptic nationalism spawned many radical religious sects within Israel: the Pharisees, Zealots, Baptists, Mandeans, and Essenes, along with the Nazarenes, which were Jesus followers, were all a part of a growing messianic movement committed to the fulfillment of the covenant promises, basis of BCN, Cardinal Sun God, Air, Lesson 3, page 24.
Thank you.
Well,
The book of Daniel is one such book responsible for helping usher in a resistance movement. Its purpose is nowhere close to being in line with preachings by today's Christian ministers, as they recall the tales of Daniel.
That's right.
The first 6 books are considered the faith books of Daniel, highlighting the times he and his companions had their faith challenged. When we hear of the prophets from the traditional slave church preacher, it conjures up visions of a saintly, stately white man delivering God's message to the sinners of the world.
That's right.
I say slave church because that's what it was and is.
well,
It's a religious message given to us by the slave master on the slave plantation. So therefore, we are products of a slave church.
That's right.
The message today, as in past lessons, will challenge you to look at the Bible in a different way.
Well,
So let's get ready for a black Christian nationalist look at the scriptures.
amen.
As highlighted by Brother Shingai a few weeks back, the life of a prophet was not a glamorous position. In fact, it was stressful and dangerous to one's health.
Well,
The prophet was probably the most unpopular person in the kingdom of the black nation Israel. They essentially had the arduous task of telling folks that were doing wrong to straighten up and get right. Now, I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that. Now, you think about your children, the many times that you talk to them about being good and not doing crazy stuff out there in those streets.
well,
And then you get one of those phone calls from the county jail. And they on the other line, oh mama, oh daddy, come get me, please come get me, come get me. You prophesied, you know, it's trouble out there in them streets, but they just ain't gonna listen, don't wanna listen. But as a former jailer in the DeKalb system, if you get that call, you might want to try to get them before they get up on that upper floor.
well,
As in the vernacular of the president, currently, bad things happen. Well, we know when we try hard to put our children on the right path, they just don't want to listen, they don't want to do right. But guess what? We got same issues right here. Let's look at some of the things that we need to do. We know we're supposed to do right. Jeremiah said groups tend to fly apart rather than come together.
well,
As a result, you end up with dysfunctional groups, contributing to a dysfunctional or marginally functional organization. We know this, but we do not work harder to stay together or find it convenient. We find it convenient to fly apart when asked to function as an active level on a consistent basis. It's hard to turn a person or a people around when they just insist on doing wrong.
Come on now.
We have coined a new title song. I've been in some group meetings, been in some KCP meetings, been in some admin meetings.
Come on.
And I mean, if we kind of change the title of this song, it would go something like this right now. If love and individualism was wrong, I don't want to do right. You been in those group meetings? This is the challenge of the prophets. Men and women caught up with a burning love for the law and the covenant find that they risk ridicule and life-threatening situations while trying to bring the black nation Israel back to God and continue to struggle to realize and fulfill the covenant promise, becoming a great nation.
Well,
The book of Daniel is about the historical period known as the Babylonian exile. This is a period of about 590 BCE to 540 BCE. Now, if this time period sounds familiar to those of you that have been coming out, it is. Our resident Bible scholar, Kanata, touched on it a few weeks ago. We have covered this period a number of times previously. This is because the biblical events documented in the various books of the Bible are not in chronological order.
well,
More miseducation from the slave church.
well,
We have been raised to believe that Genesis is the first book of the Bible and events just flowed sequentially in order till it ends up in Revelation. That is largely due because we don't read the Bible outside of itself. We latch on to a story, a verse, and then expound on God's master plan for salvation.
Well.
Instead, we need to understand what was going on in the world at that particular point in time. While Daniel covers the exilic period, it was actually written about 400 years later than the exile.
Well.
To kind of better understand what I'm saying and what Kanade talked about previously, let's try to picture or look at Daniel and some of the other books like this. How many of you have seen movies about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table? All right. Now, how many versions of that period do you think there are? That's right.
Several.
I looked in Netflix. Netflix lists 20 plus versions of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. So that's kind of the same thing with the prophetic books. We have different writers, different writings of Daniel, or writers talking about different stories at different times and points of time in history. So this is why you get over and over again different people talking about the same issues and the same stories.
Well.
Historians date the writings of Daniel to be during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes, the Greek king. This book is written shortly before and leading up to the Maccabean revolt.
Well.
The authors were using storied legends of the past to give hope and send a message to the members of the black nation Israel. They were being persecuted and harassed by the Greeks. The book of Daniel uses the exile with the Babylonians and Persians as an example, a comparison to their own then present day situation. The book of Daniel is both an omen to the people of the black nation to get it right, and also contains hopeful, visionary messages that they can be a great nation. Did I get someone to read for me Daniel 3, verses 15 through 19? Daniel 3.
Daniel follows the apocalyptic tradition common to pre- and early Christian era writings between 165 BCE and 90 AD. Oh, sorry.
Okay, it's
in your Bible.
Oh, I don't have it.
It's okay. It's all right.
I thought that's what this was.
That's all right. I don't cover that. And you were doing it so well, I might let you do it.
When you hear the sound of horn, pipes, lyrics, trigons, harps, bagpipes, or any other instruments, are you prepared to prostrate yourself and worship the statue I have made? If you refuse to worship it, you must be thrown straight away into the burning fiery furnace. And where is the God who could save you from my power? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Your question hardly requires an answer. If our God, the one we serve, is able to save us from this burning fiery furnace and from your power, O king, he will save us. And even if he does not, then you must know, O king, that we will not serve your God or worship the statue you have erected."
All right. Daniel follows the apocalyptic tradition common to pre- and early Christian era writings between 165 BCE and 90 AD. The apocalyptic books are not meant to be taken literally, but are viewed in terms of the revelation concerning the ultimate triumph of good over evil. God's light over the powers of darkness, oppression, slavery, and man's imposed suffering upon his fellow man. Apocalyptic writings are generally written in code, using grand imagery, past events, celestial figures, or animals to symbolize kings, events, and nations. They were meant to infuse fresh inspiration courage, hope, and faith among the despairing black nation Israel.
Amen.
Daniel is the only apocalyptic book accepted in the Protestant Old Testament.
Well,
Now in chapters 1 through 6, as I said, deals with the pressures and challenges Daniel and his friend go through trying to stay true to their beliefs. Though exiled, they held high status positions, and his friends go through trying to stay true to their beliefs. They in fact embarrassed the Babylonian sages and advisors with their superior intelligence and wisdom. Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were constantly pressured to change their lifestyle and be like those in charge. They refused to eat the meals offered royal staff because it was against their beliefs to eat meat not drained of blood. Now, they didn't have to do it. They were in the elite of the black nation Israel serving the Babylonians. The rank and file, they were still in Jerusalem. Those that were with them in Babylon, they had privilege and status. It would have been easy for them to be Babylonian-like. No one would have held it against them. They, however, had a fear of God and pride in their culture and would not compromise. Our church was founded and formed by a similar individual, Jeramogi Abebe Ajamin. And I quote from Bishop Jawanza Mbakise, May 22nd, 2005. In the 20th century, black people in America were blessed by the presence of another great prophet who had an equally hard time. A prophet that spoke as poetic and profound as Jeremiah or Isaiah ever did. A prophet that was as scathing and convicting as Ezekiel. As clear-cut, insightful as Hosea and Amos. A prophet as messianic and anointed as Jesus. It takes a different kind of person to turn down things based on your principles. When the world says you don't have to be like that anymore. It's one thing when you are in a strict, uncompromising situation, like growing up in your parents' house. When mama lays down the law, you best follow the law that mama laid down. When, however, mama is not around, can you still hold true to her teachings? Can you resist a non-demanding or counter-demanding culture and stick to how you were raised and how you were taught? Can you practice our Christian beliefs, our black Christian nationalist beliefs, even if not demanded or required? While you stand and proudly request, can you stand and proudly request in your group meeting that you recite the creed, even though the group leader doesn't say anything about doing the creed? Do you have the character to at least try and be communal and subvert your selfish individualism for the betterment of the church? Now, I'm just saying, y'all. At what point do you fudge on being a black Christian nationalist? Can you fudge on BCN and still claim to be a black Christian nationalist? Hell to the no. To read Daniel for me, chapter 4, verse 22 about the dream of the tree.
You are to be driven from human society and live with the wild animals. You will feed on grass like the oxen.
My Lord.
And you will be drenched by the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass over you until you have learned that the Most High rules over the kinship of men. That's right. And confers it on whom he pleases.
Okay, this scripture is in regards to one of many Daniel's interpretations of dreams that King Nebuchadnezzar had. But in a nutshell, the dream was about a giant, beautiful tree that provided shade and protection and all sorts of gratuities, if you will, for the animals around it. only to be cut down to the stump. This was part of the dream. And the interpretation that Daniel gave was this, that your days of rule are coming to an end. You will be cut down. And the only chance of you rising again is to acknowledge the power of God and to submit to it.
That's right.
This dream interpretation brings to light a slightly different style of apocalypse. Intertwined with apocalyptic nationalism writings is what also can be called apocalyptic universalism.
Well,
God would humble or cause to crumble nations opposing the black nation Israel.
Well,
They in turn would see the power of God, of the black nation Israel, and they themselves would begin to worship him. This then makes the religion of Judah worldwide or universal. This religious concept is in keeping with the Black Christian Nationalist document BCN Statement of Faith,
well,
where we prepare for the third covenant.
amen.
God's restoration of the black man to rule over all nations of the world in power and righteousness forever and ever.
Amen.
The book of Daniel is not about fudging on God. It's about not compromising the established law of the black nation Israel. It is an instructional and inspirational book about what happens when you obey God. When you follow your training and uphold your beliefs.
well,
The slave church, however, would have you think otherwise. It would have you think of some miraculous intervention by God to save Daniel from being eaten up by lions. The slave church would have us believe that God will surround you in a fire retardant field so fire can't burn you.
That's right.
When you run across one of those Baptist preachers hooping and hollering about how God went into that lion's den and gave them old lions lockjaw, just invite them down to the Atlanta Zoo and demonstrate the awesome power. He's going to have some kind of rationale about, oh, you're going to tempt God or something. But let's kind of look briefly at this clip about what 95% of black people hear in our churches day in and day out.
All right.
Well,
but something amazing happened. Instead of dying in the flame, they are loosed, walking around in the fire. Okay. Now I need you to get this. Can we look at verse 21? I'm gonna wrench this text out. Then these men were bound in their coats, their trousers, their turbans, their garments, and were cast into the what? Midst of the what? Let's look at verse 20. The Bible says this, verse 20. Go back, watch this. The Bible says, the king commanded certain mighty men of Balaam, who were in the army, to bind the boys up, to cast them in the furnace. Verse 21 says what? That these men were bound and they were cast into the furnace, right? Watch verse 20. That when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got elevated, they had haters. And the haters conspired with the king and said, let's build an image because we know they're not going to bow down. So it was a conspiracy because they knew they were Hebrews. And so the king brought into the conspiracy. And so when it was time to bow down, the boys stood up. As a result of standing up, the king said, all right, then y'all who came to me with this, take them and throw them into the fire. The men who helped on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, throw them in the fire, but the same fire burns them. Look at your neighbor and say, you better be careful how you handle somebody like me. The same mess you trying to get me caught up in, it's the same mess that'll take you. They were tied up out of the furnace, bound. some stuff that has you tied up. You've been trying to get deliverance from. But your deliverance from it is not going to take place outside of the birth. God said the only way for me to get some of that stuff out of you is to let you get it. To find you where that stuff going to get out of you. Am I talking to anybody up in here today?
So you get the point, right? See how he flipped the switch? Took a whole religious message of freedom and waiting to get strong and obey God's will to fight for liberation. He done took it somewhere else, worried about, little petty stuff. Flip the switch. You get all caught up in the entertainment. And your brain just shuts down. You're being entertained and don't understand what is actually happening to you at that particular time.
Well,
Daniel in the lion's den is a metaphorical message given to members of the black nation Israel, letting them know if we hold true to our covenant beliefs and what we have been taught as a nation, God will protect us from the Greek oppressors just like he protected Daniel.
well,
The writers are trying to tell the nation we do not bow down to other gods. The fiery furnace is metaphorical. Stand by God's established principles and God's energy will cool the hot flames of your oppressors. Your protection and your salvation is being who you are supposed to be. In our case, black Christian nationalism.
well,
We do not let anyone dictate, regulate, or forbid us from serving and worshiping our God as the way that we are supposed to worship God. God's not going to be running around trying to pay your light bill. God's not going to be sending you online dating matches. Why would he? You done already messed up about 4 or 5, Mr. God wants you to be a liberator for his people.
that's right. Amen.
When you do that, then you will get God protection. And even if you don't get the protection you think you should have had, be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they said to the king, even if he does not, O king, you must know we will not serve your God or bow down to the statue you erected.
Well,
The prophets of old were operating on the assumption that its audience of the black nation Israel had a base knowledge of the covenant, the laws, the code of ethics, if you will, of the nation. We can't make that assumption. If you were not grounded in knowing black Christian nationalism, you are subject to be at a loss as to whether you are on the road to compliance with God's will.
my Lord, my Lord.
So besides reading BCN and Black Messiah, there are other BCN covenant guides that you must avail yourself to.
Well,
You've got to understand and look at BCN teachers. You've got to know about the various triangles.
well,
You have to learn and understand how the group processes should work.
well,
Not run from it based on misconceptions and outright rejections by those who are afraid to have it work on them. They are happy in their individualism.
well,
It has little to do with harsh, unsympathetic criticism. They just want to be who they want to be. You need to know guidelines of behavior
well,
and establish mores and interactions, such as the right hand of fellowship after meeting, even if it was a rough meeting. Speaking or greeting each other with a handshake and a hug.
well,
Proud of being seen in red and black because it means I am part of something different.
That's right.
I am a visible, walking symbol of an alternative lifestyle.
well,
Daniel made me have to say that. I'm sorry, but just had to say it. If a prophet dropped down in our midst and began to talk about how we have gone astray, it would be senseless. Because half of us don't realize we have gone astray.
Well, have mercy.
And the other half have never been grounded in best practices of black Christian nationalism to know what astray is. And
My Lord, teach, brother.
There are those that just lavish in their astrayness. It took at least 16 weeks of daily basic training to begin to comprehend or understand what BCN stands for and why.
Well, amen.
And if moved by God to take that training and become a leader, then you would advance to leadership training and be required to do more work and to learn more.
Well,
only then can you begin to comprehend what this liberation struggle is all about.
well,
Understanding all these things keeps the struggle for freedom alive. When you have a situation where things seem disjointed and or stagnant or just downright confusing, behold, a prophet will come.
well,
A prophet will come to at least let you know how to get on the right path.
well,
Doesn't mean people will heed the prophet. But all a prophet can do is what a prophet do.
That's right.
Prophesy.
well,
Look for the ones ridiculed.
That's right.
Shingai, you may be looking at a prophet. Look for a downright stubborn, unyielding person. It just may be a prophet crying in the wilderness.
Amen.
Someone,
my Lord.
Maccabees,
Have mercy.
17.
All right,
The King's commissioners then addressed Mattathias as follows. You are a respected leader, a great man in this town.
Well,
You have sons and brothers to support you.
that's right.
Be the first to step forward and conform to the king's decree,
Well,
as all the nations have done, and the leaders of Judah, and the survivors in Jerusalem. You and your sons shall be reckoned among the friends of the king. You and your sons shall be honored with gold and silver and many presents. That's number 22.
Yeah, keep going.
Raising his voice, Mattathias retorted, even if every nation living in the king's dominion obeys him,
well,
each forsaken as ancestral religion to conform to his decree, I, my sons, and my brothers
well,
will still follow the covenant of our ancestors.
amen, amen.
Continue.
Heaven preserve us from forsaking the law and its observance. As for the king's order, we will not follow them. We will not swerve from our own religion, either to the right or to the left.
Amen. All right, come on, brother.
Apocalyptic nationalism, which undergirds the stories of the trials of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were a key factor for the insurrection against the Greeks' tyrannical reign.
Well,
The writers of the book of Daniel could not openly write inflammatory prose of overthrowing their oppressors. However, the miraculous rescues from seemingly certain death, time and again, served as paralleling inspiration for a core group of true believers to stay true to the covenant.
well,
Daniel was constantly harassed by jealous counterparts. They manufactured a Modine type situation. They tricked the king into laying down a new law. No one prays to any other god for 30 days. All prayers should be to him. Daniel, however, prayed on 3 times a day to God of the black nation. He did not waver.
Well,
This is what caused his check-in into the lion's den. Now remember, the book of Daniel was written to help the nation stand firm and not bow down and pray and offer abominable sacrifices on their altars.
well,
Obviously, from the scriptures read, this story took root in the Maccabees family. Instead of bowing and offering sacrifices to Greek gods,
amen.
they struck down the Greek messenger and a weak-minded member of the nation that tried to capitulate.
Well,
That's right.
The Greek and Roman invasions of the black civilized world reduced the small black nation Israel to insignificance.
my
The
Lord.
rise of Greek Hellenism and its spread, which displaces the great indigenous African cultures whose glories are the basis upon which Greece rose from its obscurity.
Well,
One high point in these troubled times was the struggle for self-determination waged by a few black dirt farmers, the Maccabees.
well,
Who
amen.
indicated a faith rarely paralleled in human history. Their faith is the ultimate victory of good over evil. And God's intervention of power to help them, and it led to an amazing victory over the white monolithic power of their day.
Well,
Only a minority, however, listens to a prophet.
well,
Most are content in their newfound lifestyle outside of the one that God had prepared for them. Daniel and members Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were living good. Those that were taken into exile were the cream of the crop, the skilled and the brightest of the bright. They were the millennials of their time. We have brothers and sisters that get so caught up in being near the white man in his high-rise offices, they ain't studying a prophetic voice.
well,
They see a white bigot in Alabama being elected to the Senate after being put off the bench twice,
Well.
and campaigning and waving a pistol that he believes in
Well.
the right to bear arms. They don't see that as an ominous warning, trouble dead ahead.
well,
We have brothers and sisters thrilled to death to hang out at the clubs with their white friends, laugh and joke like they and black people don't have a care in the world.
That's right.
You know it to be true. They think they have risen to the top and they have become Babylonians, Persians,
have mercy.
Greeks, Americans. It's been reported down through the ages in the Bible how the oppressor has used the skills and the skills of the conquered and the intelligence of the conquered to keep them in power.
Well,
It continues still until today. Let's look at this list. George Washington Carver, Derek Morgan, Patricia Bath, who was the inventor of the patent for laser Paco probe, which is used for laser cardiac surgery. George Carruthers, a physicist inventor of the ultraviolet camera and stethograph used by Apollo 16, unveiling mysteries in space in our atmosphere. Mark Dean, engineer and scientist credited for the color PC monitor and the first gigahertz chip. And we could go on and on and on, but Brother Olatunji catch you up in history class. Black folks living in Buckhead, Sandy Springs isn't a new thing. And it's not a big thing. It is, however, a sad thing.
well,
Because of the attitude of many of them bring to the table. But I will try to get to that next week when we talk about assimilation of a nation or rejuvenation of a nation.
well,
In closing, another lesson that is found in the book of Daniel, what he is trying to portray to the black nation Israel, is regardless of your position in the oppressor's house, no matter how much you rub elbows with the boss, the minute you don't jump to the snap of his finger,
well,
you can be in the lion's den.
well, amen.
The minute you don't get up off your knees when told by master during the national anthem, you will find yourself in the fiery furnace.
Well,
When you hear about Daniel in the lion's den, you see someone taking, when you hear about Daniel in the lion's den, or you see someone talking stupid about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you just need to put a pin in that conversation. Let them know that these events were commitment checks. How much do you love the Lord? Mm-hmm. How committed are you to the principles of black pride? Mm-hmm. How committed are you to BCN theology?
Well,
how committed are you to continuing the prophetic message of Jeramogi Abebe Ajimen?
Well,
your answer will be evident in what you do.
Amen.